So this is a show about nothing. I thought I was watching Ahsoka, not Seinfeld. I'm not going to bury the lead. Nothing important happens in this episode. In fact, nothing interesting happens in this episode. This episode isn't fluff or even filler. It's just there. Here's what does happen. Ahsoka tries to train Sabine. She's a Mandalorian, so she's okay with the fighting, but since Sabine can't use the Force training goes nowhere. Meanwhile, Hera talks with some senators to inform them about the former Imperials still supporting the Empire and Thrawn, but the senators don't care about the potential threat of the Imperial supporters and don't think Thrawn is still alive. Instead, they think this is a ruse by Hera to try to find Ezra. Hera then bumps it to her son Jason, who tells her he wants to be a Jedi. Back with Ahsoka and Sabine, they get attacked by Hati when they arrive at the location of Morgan's giant hyperdrive ring. Their ship gets damaged, but they fix it, and then they wind up landing on the planet where you have to bring the thing to find the place to find the thing to get to the place to find Elon Dusk. Balin realizes they're there, either because Hati tells him, which we don't see, or he senses them. And that's the end of the episode. When it ended, I literally went, that's it? The episode is barely 30 minutes long, but still felt slower than fossilization, and nothing happened. If I were being generous, it's just a recap of all the things we learned from the first two episodes. Let's start with Sabine's training. We already know she can't use the Force, so having a 5-minute long scene of her blindly flailing around doesn't tell us anything new. Well, that's not entirely true. We do learn that however Ahsoka trained Sabine before, she never bothered with the whole blind training thing. I don't know why that wouldn't come up. It's the first proper training Obi-Wan gives Luke on the Falcon. We see Yoda teaching this to toddlers in episode 2. But Ahsoka, badass that she is, never tried to find out if a Mandalorian could fight without seeing. Then we get this moment later when Sabine and Ahsoka talk about the Force. Sabine admits that she can't use the Force, but Ahsoka says that the Force is in everything, implying that anyone can learn to use the Force, except
that's not how the Force works.
It's been well established that people who can wield the Force are rare and born with that talent. It's not just something anyone can pick up. However, Disney has toyed around with this idea that anyone can be Force sensitive a couple of times, most notably with Donnie Yen's character in Rogue One. Although he couldn't actually use the Force, and it wasn't clear if his perceptions were from him being somewhat Force sensitive or just being more aware of his surroundings because he was blind. That's the dance they've been doing, where they imply but don't commit, and I think it's a terrible idea. What makes the Force special is that only some people can use it. If anybody can use it, then it loses its mystique. Turning the Force into something akin to a soft magic system, where you just have to know the words to make it work, just ruins the idea. I would think Dave Filoni would know better, but this has been a trend in entertainment lately. This idea that everyone is special, that anyone can be special. We've seen this most recently with Spider-Man, where the idea of Spider-Man has been reduced from Peter Parker realizing that with great power comes great responsibility, to the name Spider-Man essentially being a synonym for superhero, so anyone could just put on the suit and use the name and that makes him Spider-Man. That just ruins the idea of Spider-Man, and the same goes for the Force. There's got to be something more to it than just using a name and waving your hand around, and Ahsoka admits this. Sabine is like, yeah, but I can't use the Force like you, and Ahsoka admits that talent is a factor. Okay, then what was the point of the blind training? Was this the reason why you never bothered to do it in the first place? If you know she doesn't have the talent to use the Force, why are you trying to get her to sense things with it? You could just train her to fight better. She is, after all, a Mandalorian. She's already skilled. Just improve her fighting skills. There's no reason you can't teach her how to calm her mind and train her body. You don't have to make her use the Force when you know that she can't, but that's exactly what happens. Sabine sits there trying to move a cup, knowing full well she can't. Now, this would normally be where there would be some payoff for this, where we find out that she can move it but only under certain conditions, or we find out that her Force talent is leaning in a completely different direction. The expanded universe was great with this, showing that some Force wielders were terrible at sensing other people's thoughts, but had great telekinetic abilities, while others were more attuned to sensing life, but couldn't move a speck of dust no matter how hard they tried. If this is what's happening with Sabine, fine, but you need to show it. We're 2 hours into the series, 3 episodes into the series, and we've gotten nothing. This is just getting silly. Speaking of silly, we get this scene with Hera, Mon Mothma, and the Senators. I said in my previous review that it makes the New Republic powers that be look stupid if they ignore the Imperial supporters, and this entire scene is built around proving it's as dumb as it sounds. The level of naivete they express is staggering. I get that the show is probably playing on what happened in some places following the fall of the Third Reich, and how many of those who followed the funny mustache man found their way back into positions of power in the new government. That did happen, and it was really stupid, but not as stupid as letting these people remain in power when you have direct evidence of them trying to finish the funny mustache man's plan. The New Republic has proof that former Imperials conspired to steal hyperdrive systems for some woman hell-bent on bringing back Grand Admiral Thrawn, and the Senator's response is, meh. What makes even less sense is that the scene implies that some of these senators were in the Imperial Senate before it dissolved. Why would they be put back in power? Wouldn't the people of their worlds want new leadership to try to stay clear of anyone who backed the Empire or the Emperor? Who would trust any of them? It's fine if Filoni wants to have some political shenanigans, but he has to show them, and they have to make sense. Speaking of making sense, can someone explain how a human and a Twi'lek can have a kid, but instead of having tendrils like his mom, he comes out looking like Doc Samson? Also, since his father was Force sensitive, shouldn't y'all check to see if he is too, and train him? You know, just in case. You could have Ahsoka train him and Sabine, so we'd see the dichotomy of this kid using the Force while his play auntie struggles to do nothing. It's mean, but at least it'd be interesting and create some tension, unlike the space battle that follows. So Ahsoka, Sabine, and Huyang arrive at the sector where Morgan Elsbeth has built this hyperdrive ring. I thought it was a jump gate, but instead it's just a massive ring with 7 hyperdrives attached that, with the right coordinates, would be fast enough to travel to another galaxy. So the crew finds this, but immediately gets attacked by Hati and her team. The dogfight isn't bad or boring, there's just no tension. The show kinda comes close with Ahsoka and Sabine being out of sync, with Ahsoka's flying throwing off Sabine's targeting, but that's quickly resolved by Sabine just telling Ahsoka when and how to move. If only there was a thing they could have used to weave in what happened earlier in the episode. Some force that could have been used as a way for the pair to get in sync. That's a total missed opportunity for Ahsoka and Sabine to connect using the Force. Even if Sabine can't use it, Ahsoka can. She could have told Sabine to calm her mind so Ahsoka could sense Sabine's intent, which would have given Sabine some on-the-spot training of what it feels like to have someone using the Force to read her mind. Maybe she could have gotten tired of it, or in the moment accidentally closed her mind off, revealing that while she's not Force sensitive, she has some skill in blocking the Force. Just something to make the earlier scene have some significance. But no. They manage to get in sync, destroy most of the fighters, and then get closer to the hyperdrive ring so Huyang can scan it. Morgan fires on them, eventually knocking out their systems, and then Hati comes in to clean up. Now, I want you to think, what is one of the coolest things you could imagine a Jedi doing? Their ship is down, adrift in space. No deflectors, no weapons. What is the coolest thing you could imagine a Jedi doing? Is it not putting on the spacesuit, walking out on the hull of the ship, and fighting off starfighters with the lightsaber and the Force? Your brain should melt from the thought, and yet if you watch this episode, it will remain solid, because this show somehow managed to make that awesome thing kinda forgettable. It's so slow it loses all the magic, but if you want to see it done right, play it at 1.5 speed. This show seems like it's built around taking things that should be interesting and making them mundane. For example, the easiest way to add tension to the scene is for the ship to be so heavily damaged that they have to land on the planet, putting them right in Balin's crosshairs. But that's not what happens. They're able to get Ahsoka's ship back up and running with no problem. They flee into the planet's atmosphere for cover, bump into some giant flying whales, use them as cover to get away, land in the forest, power down for a minute or two so Hati can't find them, and then power back up and have a chat. I don't like stealing other people's bits, but seriously, this whole episode can be called barely an inconvenience. Nothing anyone does causes an actual problem. They end up in the same place they began. And then the show wastes Ray Stevenson by having him say that Ahsoka and Sabine are in the forest, and then end the episode. Yeah, we know they're in the forest. We watched the show. What was the point of that? That too could be the title of the show. There is nothing happening in this show. The last show that I watched that did this was The Preacher. After 4 episodes and nothing happening, I quit. Hell, at this point, even the Rings of Power was trying to have tension. It was bad, but it was still something. Ahsoka is so uneventful, I went and binge-watched 5 episodes of Andor, and I would have finished it in one sitting, but I had barely gotten any sleep in the last week, so I couldn't hang. On Tuesday, I went to finish watching it and saw the new Ahsoka episode was out, and I'd completely forgotten about it, that fast. I watched that, literally went, that's it, and binge-watched the rest of Andor. That's a great show. It's not the best show ever made, but compared to Ahsoka, it's the frickin' Dark Knight. I mean, I enjoyed The Flash more than I like Ahsoka. It's a chore to get through, but at least stuff happens. We're 1 episode from the halfway mark. If Ahsoka doesn't do anything big in the next episode, I think it's fair to call this show a dud. This isn't a slow build, this is having nothing to say. Andor was a slow build, but each episode gave you something to chew on while you were waiting to see Cassian become the rebel he was in Rogue One. None of that is happening in Ahsoka. More happens in the opening cinematic of Jedi Survivor than in nearly 2 hours of this show. I have no idea where this is supposed to be going because Dave Filoni isn't telling me. He could still pick up the pace and have something of consequence happen, but we shouldn't have to get halfway through the series for things to matter. That's just ridiculous. People have praised Dave Filoni so much over the years. With this show, people were expecting Filoni mignon. Instead, they got Filoni baloney. Just slapped it on some plain white Wonder Bread and slid it across the table. Didn't even have the decency to fry it. Now you're surprised ain't nobody satisfied. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.